When Constantinople fell in 1453, the world changed forever. The thousand-year empire of Byzantium, once the jewel of Christendom, was swallowed in fire and steel. The great city that had withstood centuries of siege finally bowed before a young conqueror. Sultan Mehmed II, the man the world would remember as Mehmed the Conqueror. His triumph was not just military, it was symbolic, the end of an age. Yet amid the smoke, the broken gates, and the cries of surrender, one story whispered through the ruins has never faded. The fate of Princess Theodora, the last daughter of a fallen dynasty. She was said to have been hidden in the palace as the city burned. Her beauty and grace known even beyond the walls of Constantinople. When she was brought before Mehmed, the conqueror who had just claimed an empire, the world held its breath. What would he do? Show mercy to the symbol of a vanquished people, or use her as proof that the old order was gone forever? Historians disagree, records are silent, and legends blur truth with fear. Some say she was treated with honor, others that her name was erased in ways worse than death. But one thing is certain. Her story became the echo of an empire's last breath, a reminder that even in victory, power must face its reflection in the eyes of the conquered. The dawn of May 29, 1453, rose blood-red over the domes of Constantinople. For 53 days the city had stood defiant, its weary defenders gazing from the walls as the Ottoman cannons roared from across the Golden Horn. The mighty Theodosian walls, which had guarded the capital of the Byzantine Empire for a millennium, now trembled under the thunder of Mehmed II's new age, the age of gunpowder and ambition. Inside the city, bells rang from every church, their sound mingling with the distant chant of prayers. Emperor Constantine X, the last emperor of Byzantium, rode through the streets in his armor, his people kneeling as he passed. "Tonight," he told his generals, "we dine in heaven or in victory." But heaven had already decided. Outside the walls, Sultan Mehmed, only 21 yet bearing the calm of destiny, stood before his army of over 100,000. His banners of green and red rippled in the wind, the crescent glinting in the early light. "There is no city left to take," he said, "only history to claim." When the final assault began, it was like the breaking of a storm. The air filled with the clash of steel, the screams of the dying, the roar of faith and fury. The defenders fought like men who knew their world was ending. Monks carrying swords beside soldiers, women tending the wounded inside churches already shaking from impact. Then, at the hour before dawn, the gate of St. Romanus gave way. The Janissaries poured through, disciplined, relentless, unstoppable. The emperor vanished into the chaos, last seen fighting shoulder to shoulder with his men, his crown lost in the dust. By sunrise, the city that had been the heart of Christendom was no more. The golden cross on Hagia Sophia was torn down and replaced with the crescent moon. The sound of victory drums echoed through streets littered with the remnants of an empire. For the first time in 1,000 years, Constantinople belonged to another world. Mehmed rode through the broken gates on horseback, his gaze neither triumphant nor cruel, but heavy, as if he understood that what he had destroyed could never be rebuilt. He dismounted at the steps of Hagia Sophia, walked across its threshold, and whispered a single verse of gratitude. Then, as the muezzin's call rose for the first time over the city's shattered skyline, he gave a single order. The royal family was to be found. All of them. In the shadow of victory, a new story began, one that would not be written in blood or stone, but in silence. The story of Princess Theodora, the last breath of a dying world, whose fate would haunt the conqueror long after the city itself had fallen. When the city fell, the palaces of Byzantium fell silent. The marble halls that had once echoed with hymns and laughter now stood cold, their mosaics fractured by the boots of soldiers and the smoke of victory. Among the chaos, hidden deep within the Blachernae Palace, Princess Theodora, niece of the late emperor, waited in silence. She had been raised behind those gilded walls, a child of privilege and piety, her world defined by faith, art, and the distant hum of politics. When the first cannon struck the walls weeks before, she had refused to flee. "If the city dies, so do we," she had told her attendants. Now, as the city burned, her composure did not break. The doors burst open at dawn, and Ottoman soldiers entered with torches and commands. They found her standing beside the icons of her ancestors, dressed not in royal silk but in mourning black. Her attendants trembled, expecting the conquerors to drag her away, but she simply bowed her head, her voice steady as she whispered, "Do what you must." The soldiers hesitated. Her calmness unnerved them. Word of her reached the command tent quickly. Sultan Mehmed, informed of her capture, ordered that she be brought to him unharmed. When Theodora was escorted through the streets of her fallen city, she did not weep. She walked as though she were already part of history, a ghost among ruins. Citizens who once bowed to her now hid their faces. They could not bear to see what the empire's last princess had become. At the gates of the new Ottoman palace she paused and looked back toward Hagia Sophia, its cross newly replaced by a crescent. For a moment she closed her eyes and crossed herself, not in defiance, but in farewell. When she was finally presented to Mehmed, he was not what she expected. He was young, composed, and carried himself not as a barbarian, but as a man burdened by destiny. The room fell silent as their eyes met. Conqueror and captive, youth and ruin, two worlds staring into each other's reflection. Mehmed studied her face, the last living remnant of an empire he had just erased. "You are Theodora," he said. She nodded once, her voice barely a whisper. "I was." He said nothing more. Outside, the cannons were being silenced, the city rearranged under new banners. Inside that quiet chamber, a new chapter began. Not of conquest, but of conscience. For 3 days after her capture, Princess Theodora remained in quiet confinement within the upper chambers of the old imperial palace. Outside, Constantinople groaned beneath the transformation. Churches turned to mosques, soldiers clearing the wreckage of conquest, merchants returning to the streets under new banners. Inside those marble walls, the last bloodline of Byzantium waited for her sentence. Sultan Mehmed visited on the 4th day. He entered without guards, his presence calm yet commanding, his eyes as sharp as the crescent upon his banners. Theodora rose as he approached, her composure that of a queen though her crown was gone. For a long moment neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with the echo of history. Two dynasties, two civilizations, standing face to face amid the ruins of one. Mehmed studied her carefully. She was young, barely 20, but carried the solemnity of one who had already lived 1,000 years. "You know why you are here," he said at last. She nodded. "Because my name still means something." He almost smiled. "Names fade, princess. Empires fade. But courage endures." His tone held neither mockery nor pity, only truth. He asked her about her people, her faith, her thoughts on the fall of the city. She answered each question with quiet honesty, never pleading, never trembling. When he asked if she hated him, she met his gaze and said, "No. Hate is for those who still have hope." That answer unsettled him more than any curse could have. Mehmed was a man of ambition, but also of intellect, a scholar, a poet, a philosopher who admired strength in all its forms. He had expected defiance or despair, not serenity. In her stillness, he saw something he could not conquer. That night he summoned his council. Advisors urged him to use Theodora as a symbol of triumph, to parade her before the city, to show that Byzantium's nobility now bowed to the Ottoman crown. Others whispered that she should be executed quietly, to erase her bloodline before rebellion found a cause. Mehmed listened to them all, but his expression remained unreadable. At last, he dismissed them and returned to the courtyard alone. There, under the moonlit sky, he looked toward the domes of Hagia Sophia and whispered, "Even conquest has a soul." By dawn, his decision was made. He ordered that Theodora be spared, her life protected under his personal seal. But mercy in those days came with a price. She would not be sent home, nor given freedom. She would remain within the empire, her fate tied to the man who had ended her world. When she was told, she bowed her head in silence. Perhaps she understood that survival, too, could be a kind of sentence. Mercy, though spoken softly, carried the weight of iron. For Princess Theodora, survival did not mean freedom. It meant existing within the shadow of the empire that had taken everything she knew. Under Mehmed's protection, she was moved to a secluded villa overlooking the Bosphorus, surrounded by gardens and guarded silence. The world believed she had vanished. Yet within those high walls, she lived between memory and exile. The Sultan visited rarely, yet when he did, the air around her seemed to shift. Their conversations were brief but strange, never cruel, never indulgent. Mehmed asked about her language, her scriptures, her songs. He seemed to seek understanding, not domination, as if trying to bridge two worlds that refused to meet. Still, the distance between them was infinite. She was the last voice of a fallen faith, and he the architect of a new order. At night, Theodora would sit by the water's edge, watching the city glitter under the crescent moon. The skyline she had once known, the same domes, the same spires, now belonged to another faith, another rhythm. She prayed quietly, not for deliverance but for meaning. "Let this not be for nothing," she whispered into the wind. Yet mercy, as she learned, could be its own form of cruelty. Freedom had been replaced by solitude, dignity by silence. The Sultan's favor kept her alive, but it also erased her. She could not return home, nor belong where she was. In time, her name faded from records, her lineage from memory. But in the stillness of her exile, she left something behind. A legend not of power, but of grace under defeat, of a woman who carried the weight of an empire in her quiet endurance. And though Mehmed's empire would grow vast and immortal, he would never speak her name again. Part 5. The Palace of Shadows years passed, and Constantinople, now Istanbul, began to glitter once more, reborn from ruin under the hand of Sultan Mehmed II. The city thrived, mosques rose beside ancient churches, and scholars from every corner of the world came to serve the vision of a ruler who sought to unite heaven's order with earthly glory. Yet within the grandeur of the Topkapi Palace, amid the gardens and marble courtyards, there remained one place the Sultan rarely entered, a quiet chamber overlooking the Bosphorus, veiled in silence. It was said this was where he kept the memory of Princess Theodora, though few dared to speak her name. Officially, she no longer existed. Her story had ended the day her city fell. But to those who served closest to Mehmed, there were signs. An unopened letter sealed with the imperial crest of Byzantium, a small carved cross kept among his private belongings, and the faint trace of a hymn that sometimes drifted through the halls at night, sung by no one they could see. Some claimed she had died in exile. Others whispered she still lived, cloistered within a hidden estate on the Asian shore, a living ghost who prayed for both empires' souls. Mehmed never confirmed either tale. He grew into legend, a ruler of vision and steel. But in his eyes, his advisors sometimes saw the shadow of regret. The conquest that had crowned him also haunted him. He had taken the greatest city in the world, but in doing so, had met the one person he could not truly conquer. For Theodora's quiet endurance had left an imprint that time could not erase, a mirror to his own humanity. When he walked the halls of his palace at night, past the mosaics and marble columns, he would pause before the great windows where moonlight spilled across the floor. It was there, alone, that he felt the weight of what victory demanded. Not just cities and crowns, but souls. In his final years, Mehmed ordered that no record of Theodora's fate be written. "Let her rest," he said simply, and so she vanished from history, her story reduced to whispers and fragments. Yet within the palace walls, her name endured like an unspoken prayer, a symbol of beauty preserved through sorrow, and of mercy that carried the face of loss. Long after both the conqueror and the captive were gone, their story lingered like incense in the ruins of empires. The historians of the New Age did not write her name, yet the people did. In villages along the Bosphorus, sailors spoke of a veiled woman who once walked the shores at twilight, her figure reflected in the silver of the sea. They said she prayed not for deliverance, but for peace, for a city divided by faith to one day share a single dawn. To some she was a ghost of Byzantium, the last soul of the fallen empire wandering between the old world and the new. To others, she was a saint, a woman who carried her faith not in rebellion, but in quiet endurance. Even the Ottomans, though they never celebrated her, remembered her with a strange reverence. Mehmed's courtiers often found the Sultan standing alone at the edge of his garden, gazing toward the old walls of Constantinople, lost in thought. Perhaps he saw her face in the moonlight, or heard her voice in the wind, whispering across the waters that once separated them. Time would claim them both, the emperor who built a new world and the princess who bore the memory of the old. Yet their story became a bridge between enemies, a reminder that conquest cannot erase compassion, and that even power must bow before grace. Centuries later, when travelers came upon the ruins of Theodora's supposed villa, they found a single stone bearing an inscription in Greek. "The city has fallen, but the soul endures." Whether written by her hand or another's, no one knew. But the words captured what her life had come to mean, that true victory lies not in domination, but in remembrance. And so, while empires rose and crumbled into dust, Theodora's name lived on in whispers, not as the last princess of Byzantium, but as the quiet conscience of an age that learned too late the price of glory. History often remembers conquerors by their victories, yet forgets the quiet souls who stood before them unbroken. Sultan Mehmed II reshaped the world, but the story of Princess Theodora reminds us that not all triumphs are written in power. Hers was a victory of silence, the kind that defies erasure, the kind that endures beyond empires. She was not a warrior, yet she carried a courage deeper than the sword. She did not resist through rebellion, but through grace. In her calm acceptance, she revealed a truth that even the conqueror came to understand, that no city, no faith, no crown can truly fall while dignity survives. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of an age, but it also marked the beginning of a lesson that echoed through centuries, that mercy and strength are not opposites, and that the soul's endurance is greater than the force of any army. Theodora's story is not one of defeat, but of transcendence, of a woman whose faith outlasted her captivity, and whose silence spoke louder than the cannons that tore her world apart. Time buried her name beneath stone and empire, but legends are the memory of the heart, and hearts do not forget what truth touches them. Even now, as the winds of Istanbul sweep across the ruins of the ancient walls, it is said that the city still keeps her secret, that within every conqueror's story lives a captive who refused to bow, and within every ruin lies a quiet kind of eternity.